Hi guys, I just wanted to post this video to help you review for Exam 1. Just a reminder, Exam 1 opens today, Thursday, and it runs through Sunday. Having a little technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. So the test is 25 multiple choice questions that are worth 3 points each. There are 3 short answers worth 5 points each, and there is 1 essay. You have 75 minutes to complete the exam, and there is only 1 answer for each multiple choice question. Do not exit or refresh your browser while you complete the exam. You are only allowed to take the exam 1 time, and unlike the quizzes, there is no backtracking, so you must answer the questions as you see them. Study tips, you should be able to define a concept that's on the study guide or a perspective. You should be able to provide an example. So if I say, what's an example of cultural literacy, faking cultural literacy, you should be able to do it. And you should be able to identify an example if I give you one and be able to name it. Here's a sample test question. You could be asked on the exam to explain how the feminist perspective is concerned with men. And remember, that's because the feminist perspective is concerned with the gender system and everything that's taken for granted about gender. And so that includes maleness and masculinity. However, I could also ask you to give an example of a text that you would study using the feminist perspective. And you would say a particular movie or television show, or maybe a book or a commercial. And then you would explain why you would use the feminist perspective. Maybe there's something really interesting happening there with gender ideology. Maybe there's particular taken for granted assumptions that the show calls attention to or reveals. You would need to give some sort of example of a text and then be really explicit using the language of the method to explain why you would analyze it with that method. Or I could do something like this.
I've got discriminating taste.
It's true.
I never thought that I would find the one, and I found ones in the past that I liked, but none that I really loved.
Until now?
Until now.
Do you love the taste of your beer this much?
We still on for tonight, right?
Well, you could. Try the Great Pills.
So I could do that and give you an example in which you would have to say, oh, I would use the feminist perspective for this because it talks about taken for granted gender assumptions. And then you would talk about how the woman's really beautiful, how the man is kind of this doofy guy that favors beer over this beautiful woman, that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. Okay, sorry about that. But I could also ask you a multiple choice question. Meredith Brooks' song Bitch is an oppositional message. This means A, it's a taken for granted meaning that bitch is a bad word and challenges it through irony. It takes a taken for granted meaning bitch is a bad word and reinforces it. It takes the taken for granted meaning bitch is a bad word and celebrates it and resists that bad meaning, or none of the above. Now this requires that you understand what an oppositional message is and what rhetorical perspective that's associated with. So if you don't know that right now, make a note to yourself, because you need to go back to that original Prezi that I posted regarding the rhetorical perspectives and do more work there. An oppositional message is language that is associated with the Marxist perspective. And an oppositional message is something that takes a taken for granted meaning and flips it on its head. So this answer would be C. It takes a taken for granted meaning that bitch is a bad thing and celebrates it and resists that bad meaning. But I might also ask you a short answer question in which you need to define something like cultural literacy. So I would say you can define, please define cultural literacy and give an example of faking cultural literacy. So your first bullet point, and it can be bulleted because I understand that you're working under time constraints. The definition of cultural literacy is, the appropriate tools necessary to participate fluently in a culture. And then 2 would be an example of faking it. And it could be from your reading. It could be an example that you've given on the discussion board or that you've seen on the discussion board, or it can just be an example from your own life that you've kind of thought of. Another way material might come to you is that I might give you a multiple choice question that asks you to apply something. So Shannon disclosed that she will often fake knowledge about the NFL or use a snippet of information that her dad has said when talking to friends who play fantasy football. She does this even though she hates the NFL. This is an example of A, media logic, B, faking cultural literacy, C, Columbusing, or D, cultivation. The answer is faking cultural literacy. So hopefully by now you're understanding how different concepts, or the same concept, can come at you in different ways. So I might also ask you just to explain something in which you kind of use your class material and you use your knowledge, but you don't necessarily have to put an example in here. Cultural capital is something from one of the videos in the PowerPoint about the culture of cool unit, in which cultural cachet was talked about as a reason that often we fake coolness, or we desire cool, or that we're interested in certain products. And that's because certain products get us cultural cachet or cultural capital, which is a certain amount of influence or popularity or sway. And so I would expect that you would be able to define that using not only the language that I just talked about, but also class material, right? So cultural cachet, which we learned about during the culture of cool unit, has everything to do with kind of, participating in products rather than, a value system. And you're just trying to partake in, products or clothing or trends that get you a certain amount of popularity. Or I might ask you really open-ended questions. So I might say, what rhetorical perspective would you use to critique this commercial and why? Oh no, my sound's not working. Okay, I'm going to post the link to this commercial, and so you can see it, but you could really choose any rhetorical perspective. So you could choose the feminist perspective, because it kind of makes these dads or these husbands look like doofy husbands. You could choose the narrative perspective, because there's certain level of narrative coherence here, meaning that the value system that's represented there unfortunately overlaps with a lot of other media messages. So the men are really doofy, they prefer playing sports to spending time with their kids. You could also use the dramatistic perspective, because there's some rule violations that go on at the end of the commercial, and you could say, but they were doing it for a higher cause or a greater good, and that was playing with the kiddo. So really, you could use any type of rhetorical perspective as long as you use the correct vocabulary in order to prove that that perspective is apt and that you understand it. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. I leave you with a thought bubble, because if you have additional questions or concerns or things like that, you can definitely feel free to email me, or, maybe do a little additional work based on this review session and then email me, because that's going to be my first question is, have you taken a look at the study guide? Have you taken a look at the sample test answers that I posted on Blackboard? Have you reviewed using the study guide that I set up for you and this Prezi? So I wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to reading your stuff.